Well then, why do you think people become engineers?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the individual, why they want to join engineering. I think a lot of the time, people who are really good at math, science, or physics like that, when you're growing up, teachers recommend that for you. It's not something that you kind of see every day. It's a lot of people see doctors, lawyers, teachers out in the world, entrepreneurs, but they don't really talk about engineers. So I think a lot of it is either an engineer in your family, somebody recommends it because of some aptitude that you have, or I think some people stumble into it because they just like building with Legos or doing something else. And so by doing those activities that they like, they end up figuring out that there's a whole other field that they could go into, which is engineering.
That's a good definition. What are like some day-to-day tasks or responsibilities that you have to do in your career?
So that are engineering related or program management related.
Just what you do in your daily work life, excuse me.
So, as a program manager, you're basically kind of like a team captain. So, there's a lot of different disciplines that have to work together in order to achieve a common goal. And so, your job is to remove any roadblocks from anybody who's trying to do a job that they can't complete, and also coordinate with people because obviously, like if you play a team sport, everybody has to work together. And so, if there are two people that have to talk about something or there has to be a handoff between activities or responsibilities, you're kind of that central hub, so you kind of get the information from people but also are the connection between people in order to get things done. So that's basically, and then just admin because there's charts and emails that you have to answer and meetings you have to go to in order to support that.
That sounds pretty busy.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about
Yeah.
how work happens.
So, what is like an average salary from the first year to the 10th, or from the first year to the fifth to the 10th year? What do you think is like
In
that?
in PM or engineering.
Just in your job.
In my job, so I think it depends on the discipline. Um, there are also different levels of program management. So depending on what sector you're in, I think at a minimum it starts at around 100K, and then um, what a lot of people don't know is program management typically respond or kind of report up to the directors, vice presidents. All of that is kind of profit and loss related, so those jobs, like the sky's the limit, like it ends up being around where the CEO is. So whatever CEOs make, I guess the sky's the limit from a 1 year or starting salary to 5 to 10 years. I think it depends on your background. So typically, people with an engineering background have a better time kind of going up the corporate ladder a little bit faster. Um, I would say 10 years in program management.
What's 5 years?
Oh, 5 years
Yeah.
is probably around like 150, 160. And then like 10 years, definitely over 200K, depending on, bonuses and stuff like that.
Yeah. Dang, that's a lot of money. Might have
You
to
got to
look
work
into
very hard for it.
program managers.
Management. Well, I will say that like when you be in program management, you don't start as a PM day one. There's things you have to build up to. So when you
Yeah.
say like 10 years as a program manager, you've probably been working for 15 to 20 years, depending on your background. So it makes sense from a career trajectory perspective.
What are like the educational requirements? Like, what's the minimum?
So I can speak for what we do at Northrop Grumman. If you have a bachelor's, so at a minimum, you have to have your bachelor's degree. I think it's a bachelor's and like 10 years of work experience to be kind of my level, but the minimum one is 6. And
Okay.
then if you have a master's degree, I think that brings it down to like 4 years to start. So obviously having a master's degree helps, but then again, you're hopefully getting a lot of knowledge at the same time, right? You're going to school and you're working, so you have you kind of make up some of that on the job time. Those are kind of like the minimum requirements.
That's interesting. So master's degree is where it's at, kind of.
Basically, from what I've understood, is that if you want to go into engineering and then you want to be like a manager of engineering or really want to be specific and be kind of like the subject matter expert, we at Northrop, we call them like NG fellows. So they're basically like the very, very well respected engineers. Typically, they have at least a master's degree, if not a PhD in, physics or any kind of engineering.
Yeah.
um, for program management, some people do have engineering degrees and use that in as a program manager. Typically, they're more in like the software field because they have that knowledge. I would say having an MBA, so Master of Business Administration, is one of those things that a lot of other PMs have who aren't having a master's in engineering, because you learn strategy, you learn finance, and kind of how things interplay together, people skills, more than just talking to people. Um,
Yeah.
and you put that all together, and that's how you're successful.
That's nice. What are some benefits that come with the career, such as like medical coverage, health insurance, retirement plans?
So at Northrop Grumman, there's the retirement plan, I think pretty standard right now across any industry is 401ks. I think unless you have somewhere with at least 20 years of experience right now, I don't think you have a pension anymore. So definitely retirement's 401k. I'll say at Northrop, because it's one of the larger companies, we do have insurance through our corporation as a whole, so there are more people, so it's you get a little bit less expensive insurance in aggregate, although people always complain that insurance is always too high. But I will say there are some benefits to that. From a coverage perspective, we do also have options for what you want to pick, so as little or as much insurance, it's not like forced to have through Northrop, so that's also a good benefit. We get dental, eye, normal, just medical. There's also some other benefits from Northrop that you get. Some of the like the entry level is we do a 980 schedule, which means that instead of working 5 days a week, every other week we work for 9 days to get to that 80 hours. But so we work an hour extra. So instead of 8 hour days, we have 9 hour days, but that means that you have every other Friday off, which is pretty cool. There's also some people that work what's called a 410 schedule. So basically, you can have every Friday off, but you work 10 hours a day on those 4 days a week. Um, so those are kind of some smaller level benefits because now you get an extra day where you can, do some of the, have some personal time, or then for vacation purposes, you could like leave on a Thursday night and have an extra day of vacation rather than, leave on a Friday night and only have like 2 days for the weekend to be back to work on Monday. So those are the lower level perks. Um, there's also a lot of like clubs and organizations that you can join that have some cool activities that you can be a part of, which is really nice. Um, and if you or your spouse is part of like the or significant other is part of like the military community, because our company is really dialed into that. There's a lot of support for veterans and things like that. So there are some kind of like intangibles in that way where there are like, I'll call it benefits outside of just your normal, what you would consider kind of healthcare related ones. There's also some legal retainers. We have a credit union. So there are other ways that they try to do more employee engagement, I'll call it, from a benefits perspective that's not just a salary based.
It's a lot of benefits.
We're very, very lucky. I
Yeah.
mean, the defense industry I mean, it's not as, I'll call it glamorous as probably the tech industry, Google, Facebook, X, that kind of stuff. But there is some good, or that being said, there's a lot of other technology that we are kind of advancing in. There are some trade shows that you get to be a part of depending on what you work on. So you get to see, what's out there, but also talk to kind of the customer community, make sure we're kind of in alignment. And so because of the customers that we deal with is basically like the United States military for the most part. There is some commercial sales, I will say, but for the majority of it, it is government based. There's certain, you have to, pay for that kind of service, especially because there's a lot of rules around um, military spending, military sourcing, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So, if you had to start over again in the same field, what would you do differently?
That's a really great question. Um, so I started life as an industrial engineer because industrial engineering is basically focusing on process and how things happen. How do you make them more efficient? What are, trade-offs when you pick certain things? How do you organize people and processes to make sure that you're getting the best output? A lot of times it's manufacturing based just because um, that's where a lot of processing happen. I will say that industrial engineers are sometimes, like for Disney, for example, they're called Imagineers. They're the people who figure out how to do fast passes. They're the people who figured out how to do like priority boarding.
Yeah,
And
I'm asking like what would you do differently in your career
so
if you could start it over again?
so I still like those things. um I don't know. I think if I still was an industrial engineer, I would probably do more of the finance piece of it, just because I don't have that building background. And I did do manufacturing for a little bit. So that's what I was saying. Like, does it interest me? Yes. But would I have stayed as long as I did in that sector? Probably not. I probably would have focused more on the numbers part, because a lot of times in companies, you have to make the decision between, do you want to be the best at making things or do you want to be the best at managing the money? Because that's what it all boils down to. Um, and do you have the mind to do the math numbers in that way? And I think that that's what I would have led more towards. So if there was a way that I could help from that perspective, I would do that. But I think I still would have been an industrial engineer. I don't think I would have picked a different kind of engineering if I had
Yeah.
to do it.
Um, and can you explain how you approach problem solving?
That is a very interesting question. Um, I think once you, how I look at it is, first of all, you have to identify the problem. Then you have to figure out what is the ideal outcome that I personally want to have. And then I have to work backwards from that. So who do I have to talk to? What expertise do I have to include or know about in order to make that decision or to get to that a decision?
Oh, wait, hold on. This is not working. All right, there we go. So you said, what were you saying? Sorry.
It's okay. So uh, first of all, identify what the problem is, then identify what your ideal solution would be, and then work your way backwards. And who do you have to talk to? What expertise do you need? What research do you have to do? And and then tackle it left. So once you do the right to left kind of where do you want to end up? Then you start at the beginning again and say, okay, so I will go talk to these people, we'll research these things, and then put that in that order so that you can get the answer. I think a lot of times people forget that part of the time you don't know what the answer is, and part of the time maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but you have an idea of what it should be. So you should use that intuition, even if it doesn't give you the right answer the first time or you know it off the top of your head. And it also means that no matter what, there's other people that are going to be involved in making in solving the problem. So you shouldn't shy away from either asking for help or double checking or just sanity checking with somebody.
That's interesting. I like that way of problem solving. That's probably the most unique one I've heard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Um, so those are the questions that I'd ask you, so thank you.